we're always late.
Well, no, the way I like to look at it is, it says in the beginning of Genesis that God gave us the lights in the sky to know our time and our seasons, which means
12 hours.
yeah, more or less. The sun is still, if the sun is on that side, it's afternoon. If it's still mostly light, it's not night. That's good enough.
So when the calendar says light candle 6:53, I have to debate that.
Think for yourself. What did people do before watches?
I have no idea.
Right?
I don't know what they did with cell phones.
500 years ago, you wanted the light candles for Shabbos.
That's
What did
right.
you do?
Yeah, what'd you do?
You looked at the sun.
Yeah.
And you went, how far up is the sun from the horizon? It looks like we got about enough time, not enough time. Okay, now I need the light. I can wait a bit longer.
So you didn't wait until it was down and say, oops, I should have done it 18 minutes ago.
No, that
That's what I would have done.
definitely you didn't wait till it touched the horizon. Yes.
Oh,
But you didn't have a watch. You didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have timers to tell you.
no
You had your
television-
eyes.
No television either?
Yeah. No TV. No TV.
I don't think you would have survived.
No.
Listen.
I would have.
All right. But one of the other things we had, how's this for a segue, was our own judicial system. So it is quite interesting that we have become very precise on many aspects of Judaism in the last 200, 300, 400 years. We have become very precise on kashrut in a way that is more precise and strict than used to be. We've become very precise on timing of events, especially Shabbat. Again, more precise than it could have been in the past. But we have lost much of our knowledge, especially for the workaday average, Joe Jew in the pew, of our judicial system. And that's a shame. Now, I know we cannot reconstitute the Jewish court system in its official capacity, that is to say, its coercive capacity. And remember, all court systems are backed up ultimately by an element of, if you don't agree with the court's decisions, you will be coerced to agree with the court's decision. So we don't have exactly that capacity, especially not in this country. But the ideals of justice and the ideals of how justice is created as a living value within a community is very much represented by how our ancestors pursued justice, how they pursued it through their court system. And so we're going to be studying Mishnah Sanhedrin, which explains, sometimes in great detail, sometimes in less detail, exactly how the court system worked on many broad issues and on many precise issues. So we'll be touching issues of capital punishment and corporal punishment. We'll be touching different issues of certain types of crimes, such as a rebellious city or rebellious elders or a rebellious child. Child is going to be very importantly qualified. We're not going to be talking about the rebellious 2-year-old. We're also going to be talking about some of the fundamental beliefs of Judaism. Those of you who have ever seen the Song of Yigdal, which is the poetic interpretation of Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith, those were written in commentary to Mishnah Sanhedrin. The basic principles of Judaism that Rambam felt every Jew needed to have were written because of this section of Mishnah, because there is a section that says, if you are not believing right, you lose your share in the world to come. And Rambam thought it might be important if we knew what that right belief was. And so he set out to explain it. But all of this is under the giant umbrella of Sanhedrin. So let's talk about what Sanhedrin is. What does it even mean? The Sanhedrin is a Greek word, which is a very interesting point. It comes from the same word as the English word synod, which means this gathering, this collection for decision-making. And when we talk about the Sanhedrin, we are talking about the court that sat in Jerusalem, that sat on Har HaBayit during the heyday, that is to say, sat on the Temple Mount. If you've ever seen a model of the Temple Mount, you know that at one section there was the temple itself and its courtyards immediately around it. And on the other end, now directly overlooking the southernmost wall of the Temple Mount, there was a large set of buildings. That is where the Sanhedrin sat. That is where the Supreme Court of Judaism sat. But the Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, just like in American law, was not the only court that was in the land. It wasn't as though, you and me arguing about a cow have to go all the way to Jerusalem to the big court to get it settled any more than if I'm arguing about a cow, we're going to end up in the Supreme Court. And so the first thing that Mishnah Sanhedrin, this section of Mishnah, has to deal with is, what is the court system? How many judges do you need for these types of issues?
How many people do you got in Sanhedrin?
We're going to get there. We're going to get there because it's a little malleable depending upon the circumstances. But the how many people question is going to come up. But who are the people? Who gets to be a dayan, a judge?
The rabbis.
All right, so a rabbi, right? So the general point when we see the phrase where it says, so and so a court consists of such and such and such and such, the general idea is that it will be composed of people who are fit to judge. Generally speaking, that is supposed to be someone who has been trained to be a judge, a rav, that is to say a rabbi. There are some circumstances, however, as we'll see, where a knowledgeable but non-rabbinic lay leader can also serve on many batei din, many smaller courts. And that is something that will be coming up. But by and large, your qualification for sitting on the tribunal, on the court, was that you had been properly trained in Jewish law, which is what a rabbi is. Somebody who has been trained in Jewish law. Different than a Jewish lawyer. That's somebody who's trained in American law who happens to also be Jewish. And lawyering in particular wasn't looked well upon by the ancient rabbis. Very different court system, as you'll see. And it really relied, as you'll see, on an honest and frank appraisal of all of the witnesses and all of the defendants and everybody involved in the court, the litigants, without any interference, which is what they saw lawyers as. But we'll get to that at some point. Okay, so we got our baseline here. Let's begin to talk, and as we go, we'll comment from time to time on parallels and contrasts with our American system. But as always, and Katie's already doing it for me, if there's a question or comment you need to make, stick your hand up, interrupt. Jewish learning is not passive.
Okay, so why are we going based off of the Sanhedrins, like the name of it? If it's Greek, why can't we just name the Hebrew name and translate it in English? I mean, the Greeks wasn't so wonderful to the Jews.
No, but the language and some of the information from that culture was very helpful. So there are many things in Judaism that were influenced by Greek logic and
So
by
they
some Greek
adopted
philosophy. And Judaism at the time was willing to adopt things that were useful. We didn't assimilate whole cloth, and we didn't just take it all in regardless of its value. But this crucible, the afikomen, by the way, is also a Greek word. There are many parts of Jewish law and Jewish culture that did get influenced by the Greeks, sometimes even for the positive. And there's nothing wrong with that. So we're not gonna change the name. No one has ever said we should get rid of it. We made it our own. It's going to stay our own. Okay, there it looks like you're volunteering already. Yes. Okay. So a quick refresher, or new for those who are first attendees. You'll see on each page, it'll be listed on the top of the page the name of this section of Mishnah, Sanhedrin. Which again, we're not always talking about the Sanhedrin. This is just the name of the book. And then it is chapter 1, and we refer to it as Mishnah 1. That is to say, the teaching one within that chapter. So we're on Sanhedrin 1:1, chapter 1, Mishnah 1. And also for reminder, we are using the translation as provided by the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, USCJ, who you are able to get this in your mailbox, one a day, on a cycle that will take you all the way through the entire Mishnah in a few years' time by reading one Mishnah a day. And in class, we generally don't spend a lot of time reading the commentary or introduction. We focus on the section that actually says Mishnah 1 or Mishnah 2 as our main point. But I highly recommend in your own time reading the introductions and the explanatory notes on every page. They have all been done very, very well. Okay.
Mishnah 1, number 1. Cases concerning property are decided by 3.
All right. So by 3 what? Judges. Exactly. So this is the great way of the Mishnah, which is why say more words than you have to? Right? So cases of property by 3. In fact, in the Hebrew itself, it doesn't even say are decided. That's why it's in brackets. It's implied. It's cases for property 3. And that means you need to have 3 people. So if there's an argument over who made a loan or about a problem with a sale between 2 people, you don't need the entire Sanhedrin. You need 3 people. And these could be 3 local judges that would be convened. They would hear your case. They would render a decision. And you just need 3 of them to render a decision that's considered binding and authoritative for that case.
And could the decision be 2 to 1?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And you will notice we are going to be dealing with, by and large, majority rules kind of issues. And that's why you have it.
Number 2, cases concerning robbery or personal injury, decided by 3.
Also by 3, right? So if I run over Natan's foot, he would have to take me before a tribunal of 3 in order to find out exactly what damages I owed him.
So why they use 2 sentences if they could write in 1 sentence?
So sometimes...
If there's any reason why they separate both?
Right. So sometimes the Talmud will go into the actual wording of each section. We won't always go into it, but sometimes they'll say these 2 have a similar thread that then will be spelled out. For right now, I don't know that we need to go down that rabbit hole because it can get more lengthy. That's why you end up spending a lifetime studying this to go through all the permutations.
Number 3, cases for full damages or half damages, 2-fold restitutions, or 4-fold or 5-fold restitutions by 3.
Right, and again, if you want all the details of what types of cases those are, check explanatory section 3, where it talks about the different types of damages that your animal hurt this animal, or you owe me this kind of money back because you stole this from me. Those are the category of cases that are being discussed here.
And then there's claims against a rapist, a seducer, and one who defames a virgin are decided by 3, according to Rabbi Meir.
Right, so Rabbi Meir, one of the great luminaries, that's a bit of a pun about his name, of the ancient world, said these cases would also be decided by 3. However,
the sages say one who defames a virgin is decided by 23, for there may arise from it a capital case.
All right, so first change here we're going to get. One thing, notice that when you have an individual followed by the majority, the sages, hachachamim, the majority always wins. And there will almost always be some explanation of why they disagree. And in this particular case, they're saying, no, you can't decide a case about one who defames a virgin, because if it turns out that she did willingly go with someone after she had been betrothed, but before she had been married, then she's called an adulteress. And if there is proof of that, then she and her lover would be executed. And we'll get to the laws of exactly how capital cases are tried and the very, very high bar of evidence and the court proceedings that are necessary before execution. But it is possible that if it turns out that there are legs to this matter, that there is grounds, you're going to go very quickly from a case of defamation to a case of adultery and therefore possible capital punishment. And you want to have a full court of 23 before you do that.
Whereas if she were not willing, then he'd be a rapist or a seducer. You only need 3.
Exactly right. Right. If she was not betrothed, then it would not fall into the category of adultery. It would simply fall into the category of premarital sex, which is not a capital offense. It's no great honor, but it's not a capital offense either.
Was there any system of record keeping for determining precedents? Would someone would go in and say, why do you decide this way when you gave 2 years ago, you gave Joe, you decided this way in Joe's case?
So on the one hand, you're looking at it, which is this is the distilled precedent law of how the laws have been decided, because the way that it would happen in the ancient world would be your rabbi would teach you the law, and then he would explain the law to you. And this is the teaching version, and the explanation was still being transmitted orally. But there was an oral record keeping, and we'll see from time to time in other parts, especially in the Talmud, but other parts of the Mishnah as well, where you'll hear, well, actually, Rabbi so-and-so did such and such in this kind of case. And so there was that look to precedent. And Judaism generally is more case law based than it is Can't remember the opposite. Getting old. It's more case law based than just rule based, of just remember all the rules. And so we got a lot of rules, yeah, but the workings of it is based upon case this, case that, case that. The greatest bulk of Jewish writing for the last 2,000 years, which most people never get to see, are the actual case law discussions, the give and take, what's known as the shelot, uchuvot, the questions that people submit and the answers they receive from the rabbis that go into great, sometimes graphic detail about different cases and different permutations of those cases. Unfortunately, most of those are still only in Hebrew and not commonly read by people who aren't heavily involved in those areas of study. So it's a bit of a misnomer to people that they don't realize that Judaism is so heavy in case law. For religion that writes thou shalt an awful lot, we talk a lot more about exactly how it works out than you might have thought.
And as I understand, our court system in the Supreme Court is based on this, because with the Supreme Court, you have a majority and a minority opinion written down. You can refer to it later. You can go back and look and say, oh, we're going to change it. And the rabbis, the sages from the Sanhedrin did the same thing, which really, that surprised me as I began to study Judaism. How smart our people were so long ago. I had never realized that. It was, oh, yeah, a bunch of Jews. But they had such genius. Even today, it still makes sense.
Yes, I will certainly agree with that. And I'll also say that the cleverness of it is inherent within the pursuit. Because remember, the pursuit for the rabbis wasn't just how do we administer the country that's under our jurisdiction. It was how do we pursue justice that is in keeping with the spiritual goal that God has given us. And when you have that as your spirit, you are constantly re-examining how you are deciding the cases, how you are applying the law, and the details down to the minutia of the law, the case itself that comes before you. There's no such thing as a rubber stamp answer to a case that shows up. It has to be, each case has to be examined in detail by the judges. Again, why they didn't like lawyers, because lawyers would often try to change or muddy the way the case was presented. And since the position here was we need to delve into every single detail clearly without any fear or favor or any prejudice by how it's been presented, we need to have a lawyer-free zone. So yes, obviously the modern court system functions very differently. We believe that adversarial confrontation within a court is the best way to ensure justice. That isn't the assumption of Judaism. It's a collaborative effort. The judges work amongst themselves. They are the interrogators of the witnesses. They are the ones who ask the questions of the litigants. They are the ones who will ask for more investigation to be done. And they will then argue amongst themselves, the judges, before reaching their verdict. So they are both lawyer, judge, and jury within this whole process. And in order for it to work, you have to have people qualified, and you have to have people participating openly and willingly and unguardedly. You don't want witnesses who have been coached. You don't want litigants who have been coached. When the judge asks them a question, they need to be giving truthful, honest, and plain answers so that they can see all of the details. Okay, so that's Mishnah 1:1.
Why if the farmer could be a capital charge?
Why? Because if it turned out,
But for whom? Like,
for her and for the lover.
and the farmer is only about the lady, or the farmer in general for everything else? Because here said motzi shem ra, but
Yeah.
it didn't say motzi shem ra la bachura,
Right.
the lady also.
Betula, but it's
It's only about the betula.
yes, motzi shem ra is a technical term that refers to somebody that is actually to a case in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, of somebody who claims this girl wasn't actually a virgin when I married her, and he's trying to defame her because that was considered a very big deal back then, and specifically because if it turned out that she had lost her virginity between the betrothal and the actual marriage, which, by the way, yes, nowadays when we do that, we do both parts under the chuppah. We do the betrothal,
Right.
and we do the final act of the marriage all together to precisely avoid this problem. Well, and many other problems
Yeah,
too.
the idea of a get.
There's all sorts of other problems that go along with it. So it just is much more efficient to bam, bam, let's get the marriage done. But back then, it could be an entire year between the betrothal and the final act of the chuppah and the consummation. And if you went to consummate a year later and there was no consummating meeting, then she would have possibly been an adulteress if she hadn't been raped or forced or in other ways compelled. So then she would be liable if there was evidence, as we'll see, and all the other rules were met for a possible capital case. And that means because we might be going down that road, we might as well move it to a 23-person court, because we're going to need that many for any capital case.
I think the answer why the Sanhedrin works is because in the Torah this week, Parsha, Tzedek Tirdof. It says you should pursue justice in a justice way,
right?
In a just way.
Exactly, and recognizing that the pursuit of justice is exactly connected to how you pursue justice. That justice is created by the pursuit in a just manner. That is what will prevent justice from being trampled in the pursuit. Is very, very important. And especially when we get into the capital cases, we'll see that the rabbis were going to great lengths to ensure that a capital case, while theoretically possible, was never a rush to judgment or execution. Sorry, go ahead.
And the capital charge is for whom? For the lady or for both?
The lady and the man, because it takes two to tango.
No,
Yeah.
for both.
Yes. If we're talking about adultery, it's always for both. Yes. Because that, it's like I said, it takes two to tango. And he is as guilty as she is, and she is as guilty as he is if they were both willing participants. And as a bit of an aside, the man in a sexual act is always considered a willing participant.
But that's different in Islam, where the man is not stoned to death.
I'm not an expert on Islamic law. I don't know whether or not in adultery cases only the woman receives the death penalty and the lover doesn't. I don't know that. So
That's because they make a lot of sense.
Well, like I said, I can't really judge what I don't know. So I can barely judge what I do know. All right, Sanhedrin 1-2, Chapter 1, Mishnah 2.
Mishnah 2, cases concerning offenses punishable by beating are decided by 3.
All right, now beating, makot, is not exactly beating. It is lashes, it's flogging. And we will get into details a little bit here, but much more details are in a whole other section of how the flogging took place, of how there were precautions to make sure a person wouldn't die under the flogging, or the person who was incapable of receiving the full measure. 39 was the maximum, by the way. No such thing as 1,000 lashes and all of that.
Shabbat.
What?
39 come from the same number of Shabbat.
It happens to be the same number, yes.
But not constant.
It depends on which midrash you read.
Okay.
So 39 was the maximum, but you could receive fewer if you were unwell or weak and unable to take more. Someone who administered one more lash than was required was guilty of assault. If the person died, they were guilty of murder. So when we think of flogging, don't think of the brutal beating of the 18th and 19th century. In this country, it was almost medically applied to be a precise amount of force in a precise manner and measured to the health of the individual who was being flogged. And this was their substitute, by the way, for our jail system, our prison system. We now have a prison system that we use to punish everyone that is more guilty than a money fine and less guilty than executing. We use jail or prison for everything in between. They used flogging for everything in between. And the flogging was quick, it was done, and you were back out on the street.
Now, when you say beating, even though it's mainly about flogging, whipping.
It is. It is not. There is no other form of beating. They didn't beat you up with fists. They didn't get iron bars.
What I'm saying is, what about, would you say beating is part of stoning too?
No. Stoning is going to be a very precise form as well, which we will talk about, not tonight, I'm sure, but in a later chapter.
So stoning is all by itself.
Stoning is a form of capital punishment. It's never just a stone to injure. Spoiler alert, the rabbis, as they understand stoning, is nothing like you see in the movies. Right? It's not Life of Brian, where a bunch of people are throwing rocks at somebody. It is taking a person up to a very high spot and pushing them off of a cliff so that when they hit the ground, the stone of the ground kills them.
Oh,
If they are still alive after that, then a large rock is placed upon them to finish them off. But the idea would be that it was the one blow that would kill them instantly was the
sounds
ideal.
more painful.
To be killed by one blow rather than by 100 rocks. If I had to choose a way to go, I take one blow
One
over.
blow, yeah.
But we'll get there. We'll get there. That's many chapters away. All right. So
Offenses punishable by beating are decided by 3, but Rabbi Yishmael said 23.
right. So he wanted to make sure that just in case we might change the issue up until a death penalty case, we should start off at 23. But since these kind of cases could be relatively routine, the same way that going to prison can be almost routine in some circumstances in this country, the other sages said, no, 3 is fine to start with. We can add, and this is a very important point later, we can add more judges if necessary to a case, if it gets upgraded, but we might as well start with 3.
The calculation of the month and the intercalculation of the year are decided by 3, according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says the matter is begun by 3, discussed by 5, and decided upon by 7. But if they decided upon it with 3, the intercalation is valid.
Okay.
But I thought that the Nasi decide at the end about the second the month.
Okay. Well, first let's talk about what this is, because I don't know. Pardon my phone. I don't know if everybody knows what the intercalation of the month and the year is. And right now we have a great example. Right now we are in Adar Sheni. We are in the 2nd month of Adar. And if you think that sounds a little weird, this is the equivalent of February 29th. That is to say, in order to keep the lunar and solar calendars aligned between Judaism and the Gregorian, thank you, calendars, from time to time, we have to add an additional month. In the ancient world, let me point out, modern world, you look at your calendar hanging on the wall. Right? It's been mathematically worked out of how often we have to do this, and that math was done 1700 years ago. Still valid, like good to the 8th decimal place or something. Really, really smart guys back then did much better math than me. We look at a calendar, it's already been calculated. Prior to that, however, we needed the judges to tell us when the month began, and we needed the judges to tell us when a new month should be added, because the month was begun by somebody going, I can see the new moon. And the judges would say, really? And they'd say, yes. And they'd say, what did it look like? And they'd say, it looked like that. They'd say, no, that was an airplane. Well, maybe not an airplane. Maybe not an airplane back then, but, a cloud or something else. But once they had a spaceship, exactly, the gods are aliens or whatever that stuff from the 70s was. Remember all that? Yeah. Chariot of the gods. Chariot of the gods. Exactly. So they would decide the month by that, and they would decide to add the month based upon the decision of a court. What Rabban Gamliel is saying here, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is saying here, is that they would start the discussion. Do we need a month or not a new month to add in order to make sure that Passover happens after the equinox? If they said yes, then they would bring in 2 more people and they would make a decision. If the majority said yes, then you would add 2 more. And if that majority said yes, absolutely, then we're okay. We're definitely going to do it. We've got a new month. Yay. And if they said no, then you would not add the new month, and you would just begin the next month as usual.
How did we get from civil and criminal cases to calendars?
It's the same thing. Okay. Excellent question. Excellent question. A court is a court is a court within Judaism. The decisions that are being made on behalf of the community, whether it be who owns the donkey, who has to pay to fix this broken bridge, who was responsible for the murder of this person, and when does Passover come? If it's being decided by the community, it's decided by the court. And there was no sense that some of these cases were different than other cases. Within how many judges do you need? How do you handle the evidence? Yes, there were differences there. But the idea that it would be a court, that was a court, was a court. It was all a religious activity. And that doesn't mean that it was all religious in the sense that everybody was praying constantly. It means everybody realized that the pursuit of Torah, from ritual to civil to criminal, was something that was motivated by our spiritual desire to create a community according to the values that God had taught us.
That's why it's all equally important, because God taught us all those values.
Well, there is some more importance than others, and in terms of how many judges you need for some, what type of evidence you need for certain actions. It gets more complicated than that. It's not just all the same, but it is all under the same umbrella of making decisions on behalf of the community. And knowing when Passover is, for example, which is when you would decide to add the month or not, was a pretty big deal. Everybody needed to know when Passover was in order for them to be able to fulfill the mitzvah. You know, we're all lucky. I know when Passover is going to be because I can look at my calendar, and I know I can do the mitzvah of Passover on that day, and I am fulfilling the mitzvah that has been given to me by God. 2,000 years ago, I needed the court to make that decision, or else I wouldn't know when I was supposed to do Passover. And then I would not be able to do the mitzvah, because I might be on the wrong day.
But we learn in Masechet Psachim, and now I feel good because we are interconnected.
Yeah, you're learning, yeah.
That one of the Nasim, they were very upset with him, but he decided by himself, for other reasons, to intercalate and to add Adar Bet too late in the calendar, not on time.
Right.
But it was a decision of the Nasi, not the Shoftim, not the 3 or 5 or 7.
Why do you think they complained? Because that was wrong. He wasn't supposed to do it that way.
Because so that was an exception. Usually the Nasi didn't.
Exactly right.
Because
Now,
also Gamliel, Rabbi Gamliel, also usually he took the last decision. Also.
he was often a little bossy. Yes.
So
and
there was an exception, not by the law.
not by the law. And that was why he got kicked out, remember. He was the head of the Sanhedrin, and he got kicked out by everyone else because he was not listening to the group. He was not having the open arguments. He was humiliating other members of the court. That doesn't work. And so it was a bloodless coup, and they basically got rid of him. He apologized and came back. But it was a big moment in Judaism where we said, no, we're not going to go off authoritarian rule. We have this system for a reason. But as you can see, if the group of 3 did it, it is still valid. It's not the right way to do it, but it is still a binding way to do it, and we will hold by that decision. All right. Mishnah 3 from chapter 1.
The laying on of the elder's hands and the breaking of the heifer's neck are decided upon by 3, according to Rabbi Shimon, but Rabbi Judah says by 5.
All right. So what we're talking about here is the issue of a body that is found in the middle of nowhere. The technical term is egel arufa, because what you do is you measure to the towns that are nearby, and the town that is closest brings out a cow, and they put their hands on it and say, we did not cause this death, and we're not responsible for it. The cow's neck is broken as a form of expiation or atonement. Whole nother discussion there. And what they're saying here is that whole process that is handled by the judges would be handled by a judge of 3. Except Rabbi Judah says, no, actually it would have been a tribunal of 5.
So Smichat HaZkenim is a body? To find a body, Smichat HaZkenim?
No, that's when they would put their hands on the cow and confess that they were not responsible for the death.
Oh, okay.
They found the body, but they need
Right.
3, let's say.
Or do you mean
towns.
or you mean the first part of the?
We are in 3, correct? Yes.
Yeah, we're on 3:1. Oh, you mean the elders' hands?
Yes.
Right. That's also for
the elders and the decapitation of the calf.
Okay. So the elder part there is for the case where you.
When they find the body.
No. There are 2 cases that are happening here, right? The main one is the egel arufa. That's the body that's been found. They have to measure. They kill the cow. The other one that's happening for the hands is the confession of the elders. Is when there's been an accidental transgression. The community made a mistake, and now they realized, oh no, we all thought yesterday was Sunday. It was actually Shabbat. whoops, and we did all that work, our whole community is messed up, they would then take a cow to the altar to sacrifice it on behalf of the whole community. And that's what the first part is, the laying on of the elder's hands, is talking about that case. Okay, and part 2?
The rites of chalitza and refusal are performed before 3.
Okay, so chalitza is the act when, probably give you more information than you guys need here, but this is into personal law, so it helps round out Stephen's question about how are we doing from criminal to civil to religious. Now we're into like marriage law. If you have 2 brothers and one of them dies leaving a childless widow, the widow would be expected to be married to the other brother.
The widow without the son.
Yeah, childless widow, yeah. Right. That widow would then have the firstborn of that widow married to the brother would be considered to be the son of the deceased first husband, in order that his line would continue. If the other brother refuses to marry her, then they go through a ceremony known as chalitza, which is what's being described here. And you need to have 3 people for that. They can't just be doing it somewhere in the back room all by themselves. Refusal is being referred to here is the refusal of a minor girl when she reaches the age of majority to marry the person that she was betrothed to by someone in her family. So if her father says, you're going to marry Mr. Shapiro when you grow up, when she grows up, she is allowed to say, oh, no, I'm not.
So that's what happened to Ruth. When someone, she wanted to marry with
Boaz,
but they had someone else, so the someone else that was much closer.
That was chalitza, yes.
Yeah,
that wasn't the refusal, that was
chalitza.
chalitza, yes.
Okay.
Right, and he had to do chalitza,
Yes.
saying, no, I'm not going to marry you.
Free her to marry Boaz.
Exactly, exactly. So, but by the way, just as a reminder, this is a wonderful place, and it says many, many times throughout the Mishnah and Jewish law that girls and boys, by the way, who were betrothed by family arrangement as minors, absolutely when they grow up and they are then expected to marry, have the right to say no. I know that the wonderful Fiddler on the Roof gave the impression that the papa always decided and you always had to do it. Social pressure may have often induced people to go along with their family's wishes. Jewish law did not. Jewish law said you did not have to marry the person that was picked out for you if you didn't want to. And they didn't always pick people out for you anyway, but if they had, you still had the choice.
Although this explanation down here says the opposite. It says that according to the rabbis, a father has the right to marry off his daughter while she's a minor, and this marriage is totally binding, and the girl cannot be released except upon the death. However, a mother or brother's ability to marry off a girl is less binding, and that's when she can refuse the husband.
Yeah. Well, it depends on which section you're reading. So,
okay.
All right. Part 3.
Part 3: the fruit of 4th-year plantings and second tithes, whose value is not known, are redeemed before 3.
All right, so you have to redeem these additional tithes, but in order to redeem them, you have to redeem them for the amount that they are worth. If you don't know how much they're worth, you're going to need to have a judicial opinion on that, because someone has to evaluate them to tell you what they're worth in order that you can properly redeem them. You can't just say, yeah, I think $1.50. You need an actual ruling on their value, and you need that ruling to come from a group of 3.
Things dedicated to the temple are redeemed before 3.
Similarly, you've dedicated something to the temple. Now you need to redeem it for whatever reason. You also need it to be valued so that you can pay the redemptive price before 3.
Vows of evaluation to be redeemed with movable property are evaluated before 3. Rabbi Judah says 1 must be a priest, a Kohen, and the second is vows of evaluation to be redeemed with land are evaluated before 9 and a Kohen, a priest. And similarly for the evaluation of a man. All
right. Erech vows is a special category of vow where you vow the value of something. It can be the value of yourself, right? I dedicate the value of me to the temple, and there was a strict category chart of what a person was worth. They didn't actually look you up and down and check your teeth or whatever. And that was what you would pay. And if you said, I dedicate the value of this chair, then they had to evaluate the value of the chair, and that was how much you owed. And if you say, I dedicate the value of the apartment building next door, that's a land, and that had to be valued as well. And the inclusion of a priest for these particular vows were because this dedication, this offering that would be given would belong to the priests. So they kind of had a vested interest in making sure the valuation was fair. It was already partly theirs in some respect when the vow was uttered. And so having the priest participate in the valuation was appropriate. Make sense? I know, we're learning an awful lot of random things before we get down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
All right, Mishnah 1,
We're up to
or
the
chapter
nitty-gritty?
4, number 4. No,
Not
not
yet.
quite.
I don't know. Cases concerning offenses punishable by death are decided by 23.
But certainly this is more exciting.
Yes.
All right, now we've got into the capital cases.
Wow.
Right, so we're going
23.
exactly right. So we have more people because when you carry out the punishment, which by the way was carried out immediately following the verdict, this was the court of appeal, so to speak. You don't want to get it wrong. And like I said, we're going to go into much more detail in later chapters of exactly how these cases were conducted for capital crimes. But we already can see that we've jumped up in severity here of how you have to be careful while judging it. And that means you need more people on the panel. All right. And
A beast that has sexual relations with a woman or with a man is judged by 23. As it says in Leviticus, you shall execute the woman and the beast. And it says, you shall execute the beast.
okay,
So
so
the lashes are for the human or for the beast?
Execute. That's not
Execute,
lashes. That's
not lashes.
execute.
Yes.
That's
okay.
kill it.
Oh,
you and the animal get
And
executed.
both.
Yes,
still two people to a tango. The mother for who are the people?
2 mammals. Yes.
Okay.
That's, it's specifically pointing out it's the beast that's gonna be judged
Yeah.
by
Yes,
23.
right.
I mean, where does that, how do
Yeah.
we go from
How do you have a court of
man is above the animals, why are we judging the animal?
Okay. So why would you judge the animal? We're going to get into more detail later. First of all, you execute the animal because the Torah says the animal is executed. That's the simplest
I can
answer.
get that.
Right. But you need to actually have a trial for the animal because you are taking its life. Right? We don't just do this willy-nilly. You have to establish, is this the actual animal that it was taken with? It doesn't mean the animal is put on trial and you say, all right, Mr. Goat,
What's your defense?
what were you doing on the 24th of April? Meh, meh. It is, can you identify this is the animal that was engaged in the action with this person? Can the witnesses pick it out from a lineup? It's the animal itself has to be identified. You don't just kill a random cow and say that must have been the one that was being used. So
I imagine this didn't happen very often.
I hope
I hope not.
you know,
I think it
we don't know. To be honest, I have from other research in the way that humans have engaged their passions over the centuries. Every culture has some record of this type of behavior around the world. Have different ways of reacting and dealing with it. The frequency of it is open to a great deal of debate because except for very public displays and certain weird phases of Roman history and a couple other cultures, most of the people who did this were really, really secretive about it. And unlike adultery, you don't have to worry about your partner talking.
That's true.
So yeah, we really don't know how frequent this was. What we do know is that there's some hypotheses that the European and Near Eastern resilience to things like smallpox and many other forms of disease, which came because of our proximity with animals. That actually generated a great deal of our diseases and also generated a great deal of our immunity to those diseases, which the rest of the world didn't have, maybe because they weren't doing quite the same things. but that's very much a hypothesis of immunology, or whatever you pronounce that, and how it goes back. So it is not unprecedented. We have very clear records of many things happening historically, and we can imagine that it was not the kind of thing that was impossible to come across.
No, the judging of the animal is because it's also a creation of God and you want to destroy it, or is because you can make material monetary damage to the owner of the animal if you do this incorrectly?
I suppose it would depend upon who the owner was. I mean, the person, I can't believe we're talking about, the person may have been using an animal that they themselves owned, not necessarily stealing their neighbor's animal to have this action with. So in either case, if it was their animal or not, they would still be subject to the same penalty. It's just a question of we do it correctly, and we do it as the way the Torah has told us to. So if we are trying the person and making sure they are guilty, we have to make sure the animal that we are planning to kill is also the right participant.
But if but if the person is not the owner of the animal, they need to pay something to the real owner.
You mean before they get killed?
Yeah. No, because it's property.
Yeah. Generally speaking, if you have two crimes that have, if you have a crime that has two punishments, you only face the harsher of the punishments. So I don't actually remember. It's not been an area of my study of exactly what happens in that
No,
case.
because
I understand the implication. Yes.
Okay, and take my lamb without permission and have sex, and they kill my lamb. It's also it's a loss of monetary for me.
Yes.
And it's unfair that no one will pay me for my lamb.
No, that's loss of property. That's a different case.
Right.
I don't know if he had sex with it before, but if you killed your lamb, that's property damage.
Well, if he killed the lamb, or
That's what he said.
yeah.
No,
but he's saying-
yes, if someone take my lamb, okay, have sex, okay, and return the lamb,
Return.
and someone saw it, okay, and they decided 23 people to kill my lamb, okay, they are punishing me. I'm losing money, and it's unfair.
Well,
So I want something.
so first of all, you have to understand that the fairness to every individual is not always the highest value. That there is a pursuit of justice for the community that is the general thrust. Oftentimes that is on an individual basis, but sometimes the individual is not the final goal of fairness for how the justice is carried out.
That's fine, but if I'm a very poor person,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say that's the milky cow that I have to sustain.
You've been watching Into the Woods, right? Milky Way.
To sustain, okay, my family, and they kill it, it's a serious damage.
It can be, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
But it's
is there any economical?
I have not come across that.
It's like if a child rapist rapes him. A rapist is not gonna, you never hear a case of a child rapist end up paying his parents, unless if it's the father.
Right, if someone.
So it's the same thing with the animal.
No, but he's lost his milk cow. Now
No.
he can't feed his family. They killed the cow on him.
No, you said that if they had sex with the cow, not if they
No,
killed,
but
that's
let's talk about the
different.
killing, like they
Yeah,
kill
Judge
my
is saying
cow.
they killed the cow.
Look,
And
hold on.
I
Let's
Yeah, I understand.
let's move. Well,
That's different.
we got the right passion going here, but let's change it to a topic that's a little bit easier to talk about.
Yes.
Okay, imagine somebody breaks into your house and murders a family member. Do you expect the court to force them to pay for the broken lock before they execute them?
No.
You try for
However,
more
this is
serious
different.
crime.
You try for the more serious crime, and they are
Correct.
punished for the more serious crime.
But that's different because
Why? It's damaged property.
no, because the property is
So
okay.
as
It's my
they-
property, but they
so
take
as they
my
come-
livelihood.
As they
Livelihood.
livelihood. As they come in, they also damage your very valuable painting. They ruin your car, which you need for your job. You expect them to get money from this person before they execute them.
No, but maybe the community they need to take care of
Well, the
it.
community always would want to take care of
No,
it,
but
that's
really, like, they need that community.
extrajudicial.
That's right. That's not part of
Right?
the court system.
That's called tzedakah. And in fact, there's a very long discussion in another section of rabbinic literature where they say, look, if you have two people, one of them is rich and one of them is poor, and the court case says the poor person owes the rich person money, the poor person owes the rich person money. And you have to actually make that ruling. And the community can help the poor person pay, but the community can't change the law to protect the poor person. So absolutely the community can say, we need to help this person. They lost their cow, they lost their window, whatever, their car. We need to help them. But if the law says we only do one punishment, the more severe punishment, then you only do one punishment, that's the most severe one.
I think this is a good example why they didn't want lawyers.
With these cases,
Mr. Nathan, the
with
lawyer.
these cases public, I mean, would they appear in the Jerusalem Times? And things? Or was everything?
Cases had to be public because the major source of evidence was eyewitness testimony. And that meant you needed people to hear there was a case. So if they had testimony, they would know they needed to bring it. And in particular, in cases involving capital cases, capital crimes, they had to make sure that the witnesses, because capital crimes were only convicted based upon eyewitness testimony. Circumstantial evidence could not convict you and execute you under rabbinic law. So that meant you had to really trust the witnesses. That was the only measure you had, which meant if you heard that he gave testimony that me and the cow back in the back 40, and you knew he could not have seen me on June 5th, 19 whatever, because he was with you, you would have to come give testimony that he was a lying witness. And as a matter of fact, one of the interesting things in Jewish law, the Torah says, is if somebody is a deceptive witness, they will receive the punishment that would have gone to the person that they're testifying against. It's not perjury, please pay the bailiff on your way out. It is perjury, if this was a capital case, you now get executed instead. And if it was a monetary case, you pay the amount instead. And if it is a flogging case, you get flogged instead. So being a witness was a big deal. And lying as a witness carried with it a proportional punishment depending upon what you were lying about. That was one of the only ways they had to try and keep people on the straight and narrow when it came to their testimony. No lie detectors, no DNA evidence that could corroborate or destroy a story. It was, I saw it, this is what I saw. We'll get to how they interrogated witnesses in capital cases. It was fairly grueling to make sure they were being honest and complete in their information. But we're not there yet. We got to finish with the animals.
Okay, we're up to 3.
If I
The
could
ox
talk to the animals.
The ox that is stoned is judged by 23, as it says, the ox shall be stoned, and also its owner shall be put to death.
Right. So this is talking about an ox that has attacked another person, right? It has killed a person, and if it has been warned that this is a dangerous ox in prior incidents, then the owner was also liable for death. It's the equivalent of leaving a nuclear missile lying around ticking. If you knew this was dangerous, you knew this animal could hurt, and you let it, by not properly attending to it, hurt, you are responsible for its damage as though you killed that person yourself. And just as we would try them, the owner with the 23, we will try, that is to say, we will ascertain the actual guilt of this animal with a court of 23 as well. Onward.
The wolf, the lion, the bear, the leopard, the panther, or serpent that have killed a human being, their death is adjudicated by 23.
All right.
There was an interesting thing on the news this evening in which an alligator killed a person's pet dog.
Right.
And I watched as they went to the river, they hauled out that alligator, they're going to haul away and
Dispose of it.
Right.
Right.
But they won't have a court of 23 to decide.
They won't have 23 people making
No.
sure. I mean, how do you know it was the right alligator? Right? Now, I mean, take this a little bit more seriously, right? We can obviously understand, to go back to Natan's case, you need to prove it's my ox that actually did the killing before you kill my ox. And so I can understand why you want to make this a big deal. You might think, panther or leopard, whatever, whatever, one less one is worth it. You had to make sure it was the right one.
Because if you don't get the right one will kill another human being. Once they've decided to eat a dog, they may like the taste of going for another
and
one.
more than just preventative was the sense of justice, right? it's not enough that we execute something for the crime. We have to execute the right thing for the crime. That's what justice is. It's not just creating the show of we have taken vengeance upon that which did wrong to the community. It's we have actually balanced out the action of this person or this thing by taking this action on the other side. And it has to fit, it has to match, or else you didn't actually do it. Which is why when we do justice in any circumstances, this country included, it's not just, well, you know, it sends a message. No, it sends a message that you don't care about the particulars of justice, but care only about the show of justice. Judaism was all about the particulars. Well, is all about the particulars. We just don't get to do this part anymore, which I've, always wanted to be on the lion's court.
Wow. And we're still talking about the various animals
Yes.
who have killed. Rabbi Eliezer says, anyone who kills them before they come to court merits.
That is to say, all right, Rabbi Eliezer's of the opinion of, look, a lion came in, killed a person, left the village. If someone catches that lion, kill him. Don't bother bringing him to the court of 23. You're my good man. You got rid of that lion that was dangerous. We're not going to be upset. And Rabbi Akiva
says their death must be adjudicated by 23.
He quotes, he says, no, we just established that their death has to be adjudicated by 23. It is the process that we protect, not just the outcome that we protect. And if you lose sight of the process and only chase after the outcome, eventually you are going to lose sight of the ultimate outcome, which is justice. And that means you gotta actually follow the rules, even if you think it's a good idea. I'm just gonna double check because I'm looking at our time.
Who won in this argument?
Akiva. Yeah. All right. 1-5. I think we can just squeeze it in because we started a little late, and I want to get a bit more because we got some more interesting issues.
A tribe.
Jewish 5 minutes for in favor and for against.
A tribe, a false prophet, or the high priest may not be tried except by a court of 71.
All right. Now we're talking. This is the Sanhedrin, right? The court of 21. This is the big one.
71.
This is what I said.
21. 71. The
Brain.
full
Really
Sanhedrin.
shouldn't do Mishnah at 8 o'clock. Okay.
Full Sanhedrin,
The full
71.
Sanhedrin is 71 people.
I thought it was 70. I thought it was 70.
70 could be 35, 35.
Yeah,
Right, that's right.
Right. So
has to be.
you always need to have a majority. And so full court 71. If you are going to be making a trial of a tribe, and this isn't the case where you have an entire tribe that is suspected of having committed idolatry, you need the full Sanhedrin. A false prophet, you need the full Sanhedrin. A high priest who has committed transgressions, full Sanhedrin. This is not something, even though these are capital crimes, this is not something you handle with just 23. This is one that you need the full amount. Similarly,
They may not send forth the people to wage a battle of free choice, save by the decision of the court of 71.
or 1 in 70.
1 in 7.
Right.
Yeah,
So
that's hard to
what is
understand.
a battle of free choice? Right. This is a milchemet reshut as opposed to a milchemet mitzvah. Right. So milchemet mitzvah we all recognize very clearly. That's a commanded war, and there's two basic categories of that. We had the initial war 3,000 years ago of conquest when we came out of Egypt, led by Joshua. When we settled the land of Canaan, God told us, you need to fight this war. You need to settle the land. We offered peace. Those that did not make peace, we had to fight. That was a commanded war. There were special rules of how that was applied. The only other commanded war since is the war of self-defense. If someone attacks you, everybody is commanded to participate in that war, and there's an awful lot of rules about that. And in fact, that all bets are off when it comes to people in the war. Everybody serves in a war of mitzvah, in a milchemet mitzvah, and they say you can take the bridegroom from the bridal chamber and throw him on the front lines if it is a war of requirement. On the other hand, if you have a country next door that they're not exactly attacking you, but they got some stuff you might like, and they've been a bit of a problem in the past, you can choose to attack and invade. This was the way of the ancient world, was countries would fight each other, sometimes because they wanted something from the other. And it wasn't for survival, and it wasn't for the requirement of conquest. It was just, seemed like a good idea. That's an optional war. That is a free will war, as they describe it here. And you don't get to do those unless the Sanhedrin agrees. If the king says, you know what, let's invade next door, just why not? Because I'm bored, or because they've got a lot of treasure, or they made me angry. The king had to get permission from the Sanhedrin in order to make that kind of war.
And that really happened, because I don't see the kings, asking the 71, hey, you know what? And also, by the way, for how many votes? Simple majority is enough for the decision.
Did it happen? Do you know how many kings were considered good by the Bible?
You can't think of any.
Well, I can think of a couple, right? David and Solomon mostly. That is to say, Solomon mostly in the early part of his life. Hezekiah and Josiah. That's it. Every other king has a black mark next to their name. Some of them have 2 black marks next to their name. So the fact that the kings did not carry out this rule and would attack willy-nilly and often die in the process or bring great wrack and ruin upon Israel doesn't mean that the rabbis didn't believe this was the just way that battles should be decided. That if you have to fight, absolutely. If you don't have to fight, you need to convince the judges that it's the right thing to do.
And just 36 votes.
We'll get to more of the majorities. Sometimes you need supermajority, sometimes just regular majorities. But we need to make sure our 5 minutes stay 5 minutes.
They may not add to the city of Jerusalem or the courts of the temple, save by the decision of the court of 71.
Remodeling is what's being described here. You can't build more of Jerusalem and call it Jerusalem, because there are special rules of in Jerusalem and out of Jerusalem. So you needed court permission in order to make Jerusalem bigger than it was. And so too, the temple precincts. There are special rules for being in the temple precinct. You need to make sure that you have court permission before you expand those rules into new territory.
They may not set up Sanhedrin for the several tribes, save by the decision of the court of 71.
Right, so these are like local courts. Sanhedrin it's the plural. Right, you can't make mini Sanhedrins elsewhere unless the big Sanhedrin actually agrees with it. Makes perfect sense of having a correct and controlled system of courts. 5.
They may not proclaim any city to be an apostate city, an apostate city, saved by the decision of 71.
Right, midahat. So a city that is an apostate city means the entire city has gone to idolatry. Right, the whole city, everyone. It's Sodom and Gomorrah type thing here.
Midah is like tameh, it's like not ritually pure.
Kind of, yeah. So you can look it up. The rules are in more detail there in Deuteronomy. We have no cases of this ever being carried out, but it is on the books. And you're not going to condemn an entire city unless you have the fullest court possible. It's not just me and 2 other guys went, you know what? All of those guys over there. No, you need the Supreme Court.
But no city on the frontier may be proclaimed an apostate city, nor 3 cities together, but only 1 or 2.
Right. So the final case here is a little bit obscure for talking about where, because you can't be considered an idolatrous city unless you're a city in Israel, which means if you're on the frontier of Israel, there becomes more doubt of, well, are you in Israel? Are you out of Israel?
It's not about the influence, maybe because you are too open to the influence.
Well, certainly you'd be more likely if you're out, and that's always a possibility, but this is talking more about jurisdiction, of who is allowed to make that decision for these frontier level cities. So before we close for tonight, one thing I just want to point out here is, as we get into the Sanhedrin, which is the most closest parallel to our Supreme Court, and will handle appellate type material as well, notice that it doesn't only handle appellate issues. The Sanhedrin was not just the court of final appeal. It was not just the court of final decision. There were certain decisions for the nation that would only be decided by the Sanhedrin, even over and above the priests and the king or the people, that the Sanhedrin had final say in certain topics as being the last word, or in some cases the only word on many of these issues. And that was in order to ensure that certain decisions would be taken by the best and the brightest. Appointment to the Sanhedrin was by merit, and merit alone would be involved in making this decision. And that you would have a large enough body of those people who had reached that level of qualification that you would know the decision would be discussed and deliberated on with the utmost care, given the cases that you're dealing with, which are really of national import.
But the cases of 23 must be decision made by the proper Sanhedrin, or the Sanhedrin can create a court of 23 for each town or each
Yes,
tribe.
there were regional, smaller
So
courts.
okay, so the 23 is not the real Sanhedrin. It could be like
Right.
23 others inferior courts.
Exactly. So you could have a court of 23 in Tiberias, and you could have a court of 23 in well, what's now Tel Aviv, wasn't really anything back then, but in different parts of the country, yes. All right, that's it for the first 5 Mishnayot. We got more to go. Like I said, once we get through figuring out how many people you need to handle every case, we get into the nitty-gritty of how you handle the actual cases. Next week, we are on hiatus. I am over at UCF doing a program on belief with Hillel. You are welcome to attend. It's not only for Hillel. So if you ever get over to UCF or haven't and want to check excuse, come and join us there. But that'll be next week over at Hillel, so we won't be having Mishnah class. Mishnah will resume the following week, which I don't have my calendar on, but someone might be able to tell me what number that is.
April 6th.
April 6th. Sounds good to me.
No, I'm sorry, April 6th is when you won't.
Oh, no, that's right. No, April 6th is
It's
next
when
week. That's I'm away.
The 13th. is after
13th, we'll be back in business.
that. Right, then we'll be heading north.
Ah.
So it's been wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Keep studying. And as I mentioned before, if you would like a copy of this translation, I am happy to send you the text. If